Of towering totems and volumes, eccentric finishes and a myriad of textures, this house offers a new experience with every few steps you take. So we are at Muse Lab studio today with Josefa Rangwala and Jason Pirani, who put the curious in the house of curiosities. Let's hear from them about the magnum opus that stands in all its glory in Kolhapur. So hi Jason, hi Josefa.
Hello.
I mean, it's great to be back with both of you. We worked together on Glass House and we've done Mediterranean minimalism with you. And before we start on the House of Curiosities, why don't we talk about how the experience of doing both Glass House 91 in Alibag and Mediterranean minimalism in Goregaon was?
So I think it was kind of interesting because it was almost retrospective in some way for us, because we had to revisit the process of design for a project which we normally don't do once a project's done.
I think the whole idea of revisiting the process was really interesting. Also because it was a walkthrough.
Correct.
Going back to every gallery, every sculpture, every installation that was created, the staircase, just walking up and down the staircase. What we realize is that there is so much more that's happening outside of just the studio in terms of designers, in terms of artists, in terms of techniques, in terms of things that we otherwise would have had absolutely no know-how of. So our practice is also constantly looking at working and collaborating with a lot of people.
My first reaction to the project was that they have done everything here. I was like, they have done everything here. Is this the same house? Is it not? And then, but what I also really liked was that it was not incohesive. When you have such a big canvas, how do you make sure it stays glued together?
So when we first got the project and we saw the structure, and if we were the architects from the start, maybe that is not what the structure would have been.
Absolutely.
And maybe that is not what even the interiors would have been. We stepped back for a bit and we said, let's work with, of course we had to work with the structure that's there, but let's see how one would look at it if you're purely just looking at it from an interior lens.
Volumes were overwhelming.
Yeah.
I mean, a 30-foot high living room, the central atrium is around 45 feet.
Of course, there's the foyer and then you have a very beautiful entrance door. Where do you find the moment where, okay, let's start from here?
When you design a living space as big as this, the first thing that is expected of a designer is to put a big chandelier in the center. Right? And that's the first thing that we stayed away from. And instead we decided to pepper the entire space with a lot of elements which are experienced more at ground level.
Yeah, and I think to add to that, the rug also, the experience begins at that ground level, but then it begins to rise.
Correct.
So it does acknowledge the height and the volume that you're within, right? So it's not that when you're beginning to look up, you're just looking at a sort of a rising wall.
We also wanted to create a lot of reflections at that level. The Satvario stone already has its character with the grains. And the rug also is almost like a waterfall, right? Because once it comes down and it hits the floor, then it's like these two tributaries kind of just sort of diverge, and then the furniture is just kind of sitting on them.
For the rug, of course, we collaborated with the Fazo project with Fatima and Zoeb.
I remember when we did the mock-up on site, it was a ply mock-up because we had to make the mock-up on site, retrofit it over there, and understand what it is with the furniture and how everything kind of works contextually. And then the ply went to Mirzapur, where they started, working on the rug. Also, I think at this point, I would like to talk about Harshita's installation as well, the totem.
All we said is that we want a totem that's going to be now 38 feet or 30 feet. 30 feet.
She decided to come to Kolhapur with her team for the installation. Half the things even we don't know how they managed to get it done. Although we were getting these updates, but we were a little occupied with a few other things, and then suddenly we'd get a message after 3 days that okay, now it's up. And we're like,
Miraculously
it's up.
Now, speaking of another element that really stands out in the living room is by House of Berserk, which is the cosmic disco. So, what is it made of? First of all, is it MS? Is it?
Yes.
It is MS.
Yes,
Okay.
it is all MS.
So, what was the whole story behind it?
We wanted to introduce an element which is more of a curved partition that defined the extent of the living room, but not necessarily disconnected the living room from the larger spaces in the home. And that's when we kind of, reached out to Priyanka Thakkar, House of Berserk.
It was literally her brainchild in terms of the subject of it and even the aesthetic of it.
Right. Now, let's get to one of my favorite parts in the house.
I know what you're talking about.
What is it?
The staircase.
Yes. Because I was like, so I have, I have to mention Rushad here.
If you don't mention him, he's going to kill us.
Okay, yeah, we should.
He just met him yesterday. When Jassim mentioned about how the staircase was one of the first things that the client approved, in terms of our collaborations. What happened was that we were discussing. We were on the drawing board at the time, and we were discussing what do we do with the staircase.
Right.
And then all of a sudden, it just dawned on us that okay, what if we put flowers, on the side, and then we're like, okay, why flowers? Because then it's about the whole experience of walking through meadows. From what we understand is that they are gathered in London, pressed in London, and then they come to Bombay, and then Rushat kind of sets them up.
But yeah, I mean, this was also the entire process, right? Because the staircase had to literally be, the railing had to be assembled, put in place, the panels, cut the size, all of that. And then it went back to Rushad's workshop.
From Kolhapur to Bombay. But, more than this, I think the credit has to go to our contractor Muniramji and his team.
Right.
Because if you look at that railing, like we couldn't model it in 3D. Rhino gave up on us. And his team of carpenters who actually, I still remember there were these two guys. They were there dedicatedly for at least a month and a half, carving that entire handrail, from the ground floor. And it was a mean task.
Another thing that I love, it's very camp, the bird song by Sameer Taure. It's a mix of camp and old world charm, right?
Right.
How did you get to that?
The client loves art. His father is very fond of music. In fact, he plays musical instruments.
Right.
We took that, and then he just called us one day and he's like, guys, I have it. I'm like, okay, what is it? And he's like, this is the bird and this is the gramophone. The bird is sitting on the gramophone and it's going to be called Bird Song. And we're like, okay,
Go for it.
go for it. It was just literally like a two-dimensional skeletal sketch of a bird sitting on a gramophone. And I think that is all it took.
Yeah.
But like you said, if you've seen the evolution of the sketches to, like the graphic to like the form to a small scaled model to an actual 1:1 model. He was actually one of the only artists who made a 1:1 model and put it over there on site, walked around it, make tweaks, came back. Yeah, it's a lot of effort.
Right.
Even for something which is just occupying maybe like, I guess 6 square feet of space, it's a lot of effort.
Right.
But he did all that,
lovely.
and then, did like material tests and whatnot, and finally the product, which is the project in itself, came to life.
So of course we've seen the screen, we've taken the stairs, and now we come to another. This is the part I have to call it crazy, guys, because it's bejeweled. It can make the whole place shimmer. You cannot make me speak and not bring Taylor Swift up in like it is, right? Almost like if that space has to be a song, it is bejeweled. Like, and again, I know you guys love
Oh my god, I didn't ever think of that song and I thought of this. Now I'm not going to be able to.
Even in Glass House, there was this whole gallery, which had these ruby cubes on top. So what is up with Ruby? Why is it so ravishing to you?
It's ravishing Ruby, I don't know. So actually, the thing is that when we got the project, the client was very, very keen on having glass railings for the bridge that connected the private part of the home to, let's say, the more public part of the home,
right,
on the upper levels. And then finally we're like, okay, what if we just create this very interesting screen? And that's when, this whole idea sort of came about. And I know that for this, we collaborated with P3.
Right.
And hats off to their patience. for bearing with us. I have to put this out there. I think we only worked on prototyping for, I would say, not less than 3 months. So it's CNC milled stainless steel.
Okay.
And each module actually has 2 concave surfaces, and the glass itself is bent.
All right.
So so they have to create a die for the glass,
Right.
and then there are 4 colors of glass. And Jasim chewed their brains because he was just not getting the right color of rubies. And
Right.
for me, it's okay if it is like, like even a 15-20 kind of a thing is okay. But Jasim is like, no, it has to be exactly like this. So I think a lot of iterations went in just getting the colors right.
Another thing is the Jharoka, which is, and I love that, it's not like you source some old Jharoka from Rajasthan and put it there. It's a modern interpretation.
Yeah.
I mean, not that I'm against sourcing old Jharokas and putting it. A lot of people do that. I'll be like taking a sliding at them. I love that. In fact, I like that more.
Yeah.
Anyway. How did you know that, to what extent you want to contemporize it and sort of yet keep the cultural connotation intact so that you can still call it a Jharoka?
Right.
So, in the living space or in that entire double height or 3-story space, there is one wall which is a blank wall. That was always a conversation that what needs to come onto this. It needed more sort of an architectural intervention rather than a decorative one necessarily. So we thought like a window from that little hideout space there, which kind of overlooks the spaces below.
When we got the space, there were these walls, and you would start trying to understand what's there behind the walls. I mean, even is there a space or is it just the sky?
Correct.
Right? And I think the introduction of the Jharokas in some way gave a sense of another space behind the walls.
Right.
So all these Jharokas were not existing. We actually punctured the walls. And what it also does is that it now allows you to experience the voids from a certain height.
Now I would like to talk about one of the most museum-esque spaces in the house, which is the water body. I don't know what to ask about it. I mean, what was... So you obviously have courtyards, you have sort of water bodies, you have fountains, and then you have made this labyrinth of installation.
We wanted it to be interactive. We wanted you to be able to sit and dip your feet.
Right.
You should be able to even walk through it if you wished, right? With the water just kind of grazing your feet, touching it. And that's when we thought that why not, sort of create a labyrinth where you can't tell where the source of water starts from, where it ends, and so it's always again curious in some way. We've also created these little benches alongside of the water body where you can literally sit and dip your feet in it.
Correct.
And it is exciting.
So now if I have to ask you guys to sum up the whole idea of House of Curiosities in one word each, what would it be?
Oh my God.
For me, it's a museum.
It is a museum. Okay, I'm just going to go with that.
Come on, you can try.
It is a museum.
Okay. So we all
We're all in agreement.
museum.
Yes.
All right.
We're all in agreement.
All right, then that was great. House of Curiosities encapsulates your personal taste, visions, and also a lot of what the clients were standing for. Their inclinations, their likings, and a lot of collaborations. So kudos to you guys, and it has been great talking about this house with you all. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Kash.
Thank you.
No.
I thought I took the name wrong when he looked at me.
That's why I'll not give it that look. Nice look.
I'll just do it. So, we'll think about it. Maybe next project.
No,
Why
man,
not?
don't do that.
I think Dwaj will be like, "Ye Muse Lab ko bahar."